What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Brinson. I'm your host. It is Friday, September 16th. If you were watching, or if you're listening to the pod, excuse me, if you're watching the pod live on YouTube, it is Thursday, September 15th. We go live on YouTube every day at around 1 o'clock. Today, a little bit later, because we've got a pick show featuring Pete Prisco and RJ White in the studio. What's up, fellas?
How's it going?
It's good.
What's going on?
Better for y'all. Worse for me. My
I
pick
had a good week.
Pete 5-1. I went 2-5. I had a terrible week.
And if I hadn't added the late one, I would have been undefeated.
Well, Jaguars. Wasn't it the Jaguars?
Yeah.
It's good that the Jaguars are the team that took you out. RJ 3-3. The parlay didn't hit. It was Giants plus 5.5, Jags plus 2.5, Cowboys plus 1.5. It did have some life for a while there, and we took out the Seahawks, who won outright, of course. Not that it would have mattered, but it looked like the Jags were going to win.
The Cowboys had no chance.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. By Sunday night,
the third wasn't happening.
No. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to be a little tighter schedule today, so let's dive right in and make some picks. We start with Sunday Night Football, where the Bears head to Green Bay to play the Packers. The Packers now, Aaron Rodgers actually holds the top two records for fewest points scored by a reigning MVP in Week 1 following winning the award. 3 last year, 7 this year. Bounced back in a big way against the Lions last year. Will he do the same against the Bears, Pete?
Yes, he will. And I think their defense, which they had a terrible plan last week. I thought that they would play much better against the Vikings. And why didn't Alexander stay on Jefferson more? It made no sense to me.
Jair Alexander asked the same question, by the way.
Right. He wasn't on him at all. And I think this week they'll do a better job of limiting a passing attack that isn't very good. I think the pass rush will be better. And I think Rodgers will be better. Christian Watson dropped that ball, but he's open. And to me, when I see a young receiver getting open like that, that's a good sign. So I think they bounce back here. I think they blow out the Bears. I like the Packers.
Yeah, maybe Green Bay has real issues with Adams gone, but I think it's going to take more than one game to be able to judge that. Hopefully they'll be healthier this week. Both offensive tackles were questionable last week, ended up not playing, so hopefully we'll see some guys back there. They still managed 5.5 yards per play in that game, just couldn't convert it into points or slow down Minnesota's offense with those questionable defensive calls like Pete is talking about. I don't think that latter will be an issue. I mean, there's no reason to believe in the Chicago offense despite them winning. If Green Bay is an average team, I think this line is probably still light at 10, just because of how low I have Chicago in my power ratings. If Green Bay is still a good team, this line is going to make no sense come 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I think this line should be 14, maybe even a little higher. So I have Green Bay as a best bet.
Yeah, I got Green Bay as a best bet too. Pete, you said you love them. Do you want to make that?
Yeah, you can throw it in there.
All right, let's make that the first leg of the parlay. Look, you go back and look at week 2, and I know we're comparing apples and oranges here, but week 2 of last year, Adams did have a big game, 8 catches, 121 yards, but it was Aaron Jones, who I've been stumping to be the focal point of this offense, who had the monster game, 17 carries, 67 yards and a touchdown, and then 6 catches, 48 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns, a 4-touchdown game for Aaron Jones. Would not be surprised at all if he has a huge game, and I think anybody sort of looking at the Bears and what they did in week 1 is probably tricking yourself because, you can, like the Dante Pettis catch for 51 yards, I think. I mean, it's sort of a fluke play that, probably weather driven. I don't think they had 27 yards at halftime, I believe. I don't think they get much done against this Packers defense. Everybody should be embarrassed for Green Bay, and I think they show up and play in a big way. So RJ and I have the Packers as a best bet, and that's the first leg of the parlay, Packers minus 10. Speaking of another large spread for a team that lost in week 1, the Texans are at the Broncos, and the Broncos are favored by 10 with an over-under of 45. Russell Wilson limping back to Denver after being punked and embarrassed by his old coach, Pete Carroll.
Well, I mean, he has some accountability for that game as well. He stood there with it. I mean, everybody killed Hackett, and rightfully so. It was a bad decision, but you're a veteran quarterback. All the play clock running down the entire game and not knowing how to call time. I mean, he's not as responsible, but he had a bad game too, despite the fact he threw for 350 yards. They didn't score points. They turned the ball over. I like the Texans. This number's bloated to me. Texans were tough last week. I liked them last week. They should have won that game. The late fumble really killed them and set up the Colts to get back in the game. I think they'll hang around. They're pretty good on defense, and they got after Matt Ryan. He forced 4 fumbles last week. So I'll take the Texans and the points as one of my picks.
Yeah, I don't know that Houston played that well. They were outgained 517 yards to 299 yards. That's a massive difference. So, those fumbles were key, and it was interesting to see Indy rally back. I think Denver's offense, they average 6.8 yards per play. I think they're still solid even with that questionable decision-making. The goal line fumbles kept the score down. I mean, in reality, they should have rolled in that game, and it shouldn't have been close at the end. Denver's defense looks like it could be a problem, though, so maybe Houston can backdoor this game. I think it's a tough environment for Mills. I love backing Denver at home in the first 2 weeks. They're 43-8 straight up at home in the first 2 weeks of the season, 32-15-4 against the spread all time. Teams just are not ready to come in and play at altitude in the first 2 weeks of the season. So I would lean to Denver. I'm not making it a best bet because of how big the line is and how ugly they looked last week, but that would be my lean.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little hypocritical to say like, oh, the Packers are going to come in and blow out welcome the Bears in and blow them out, but the Broncos can't do the same thing. So, but I tend to lean towards the Texans here as well. 10 feels like a lot, especially with a 45-point total there. And you have the opportunity where Houston can come in and play well. Russ hasn't played at altitude either, which is, obviously he's adjusted to it because he's been practicing there, but he hasn't played in an actual game at altitude, which I think is at least worth considering. Houston just has major backdoor potential with Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins and Davis Mills slinging it late. So I would lean Texans here, but don't have it as a best bet. Colts at the Jaguars. Colts -4, over under 45.5. The Indianapolis Colts, Pete, have not won, I believe, in Jacksonville, Florida, your old stomping grounds, where you did some of your most mischievous things in your life. You really have just desecrated the entire state of Florida at this point between Jacksonville.
I really have.
It's just a trail of yeah. It's just just destruction and pandemonium from Fort Lauderdale to Jacksonville all the way up. Anyway, they haven't won since 2014 there. They couldn't keep the streak of failing to win in week one alive. Or they kept the streak of failing to win in week one alive after that tie with Houston last week. Now they're trying to break the streak of going to Jacksonville and losing. What do you think about this game here?
But one of those games was in London, so that counts.
Oh, true.
They haven't won against them on the road since 2014. Like you said, and they had a chance to go to the playoffs last year and win, and didn't in the final week of the season. So I just think this is a tough spot for the Colts. You go on the road, you play the Texans, you go home. Now you got to go on the road and play a team that's sitting at home playing its first home opener. Or is playing its home opener. So I think that's a big advantage for Jacksonville. I think their run defense is going to be much better this year. They'll limit Jonathan Taylor. I don't think you're going to need the points. I think Jacksonville wins this game outright.
So I'm apparently predicting regression week for Pete Prisco after that 5-1 week to start out, because I'm on the other side of this one too, and I have this one as a best bet. Like I said, Indy had no business letting Houston hang around in that game with the yardage and the statistical advantage. Jacksonville looked much better than they had last year, thanks to that new coaching, but there were still major holes on the roster. I was sitting there watching that game next to Pete, and he was complaining about Griffin and the guard and this guy and that guy. There's still holes on this starting roster that I think can be exploited by complete teams, and I think Indy is a pretty complete team. Reich is now 0-4-1 straight up, 0-4-1 against the spread in week one, but that's 3-1 straight up and 4-0 against the spread in week two. The only loss was last year when they lost by 3 points, but covered against the Rams when Wentz was banged up. And I think we were kind of surprised he played in that game because he had like 2 injured feet or 2 injured ankles or something, and still came in and kept them close there. So I still think Indy's the class of the division. I'm not going to mark them down too much after 1 week of looking ugly when they do that in week one all the time. So I think they take care of business here. I have Indy as a best bet.
I got the Jaguars as the best bet as well. So we got a real head-to-head battle going here. I think, and you can say the same thing for the Colts too. Like there were some real red zone issues. You saw with Alec Pierce, who did they put him on IR? Or is he just? No, he's in concussion protocol, but he's not expected to play. I don't think, right?
No.
Yeah, he's not expected to play this game. I think that really does some damage to the depth of Indy at wide receiver. He had a massive drop in the end zone. There's another bad drop of Matt Ryan pass. But if you look at the Jaguars, they were even worse in the red zone, and they were moving the ball pretty effectively against Washington. They just couldn't punch it in. I think Doug Peterson works on that this week. They get the red zone stuff a little bit tighter. They're able to score against a Colts defense that, Gus Bradley. It's Gus Bradley revenge game too, by the way. I got the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars win it outright. And
the Colts offensive line has problems, by the way. There's some issues on that line. The left tackle, the right guard, and the right tackle didn't play very well. There's some issues on that line.
Yeah, I think, and look, maybe this is me kind of chasing this Jaguars win the division pick that I made before the season, but I
don't think that's happening.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a great option. The The Patriots scored 7 points last week against the mighty Dolphins, and they are favored on the road going to play the Steelers, where Bill Belichick has done a good job of dominating Mike Tomlin over the years. Mac Jones was questionable with a back injury, then was added to who's cleared. He's going to play back at practice, and this line moved from like either maybe a half or a pick 'em to a full Patriots -2. What do you think about New England on the road here, Pete?
I'm falling for the Bill Belichick factor here. I just can't see them playing as poorly as they played last week and throughout the preseason. I know they were not good last week, but they only gave up one touchdown on offense. One. For all the talk about how great Miami's offense was, they gave up one touchdown. I would probably probably stay away from this game if TJ Watt was in it. I think the Steelers' defense is ordinary without him, and I think they're going to, as bad as the Patriots have been on offense, I think they'll find a way to move the ball here. And I'm going to take New England minus the points as one of my best bets.
The calculus definitely changes for Pittsburgh's defense with Watt not on the field, and the offense had just 264 yards over 70 minutes of football. So I don't know that the offense is going to be that good, despite them, getting enough points to beat Bengals in an upset win. The last time Belichick started 0-2 was 2001. I don't know if you remember that year, but he won the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah. Tom Brady, maybe Jared Stidham will come in midway through this game and lead them to a Super Bowl. Yeah,
maybe the strategy is to lose.
Yeah, Hoyer's too old to be the Brady of the Brady comparison.
Bailey Zappi.
Bailey Zappi, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, not Stidham.
Yeah. So New England might be bad. I don't love laying the points on the road just because that offense might be bad. I think that's the way to go, though. So I'm not making it a best bet. With that Belichick factor, I would lean toward Pete's side, but I'm not itching to play it.
Yeah, I picked the Pats to win the game and to cover. Not a best bet. I do have a best bet on the under, though. 40.5 is a low under. It's a low total. They could obviously get there with just a few scores. But you look at what the Patriots did on offense against the Dolphins. I mean, they are just sort of lost right now in terms of what they don't have any explosive plays down the field. And Mitchell Trubisky and that Pittsburgh offense didn't do anything. It was the points. There was 17 points off of turnovers. This is not a high-scoring offense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is a team that cannot move the ball effectively. Belichick will do plenty of stuff to mess with Trubisky, and I think we're getting pretty close to seeing Kenny Pickett. Maybe not in this game, but after this game, I wouldn't be surprised if they go to him just because, even if you're 1-1, if your offense is sort of lethargic for back-to-back weeks, you have to think about making a move. Type Brinson in the HCAT if you like if you want to help us out, and hit the like button, smash that like button. So I'll take the under as a best bet on the Patriots and Steelers. Bucs -2.5 at the Saints with an over under of 44. Tom Brady has not beaten the Saints, Pete, since he joined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's a road favorite against the Sean Payton-less Saints team that came back in crazy fashion against the Falcons last week.
I'm going to throw out last week's game against the Falcons on defense because when you play those style of offenses, they did it last year against Philly. They led the league in run defense, the Saints, and Philly gashed them for over 200 yards. Last week, Atlanta gashed them for over 200 yards because it's tough to get ready for those style of offenses. This is more conventional, and they are banged up on the offensive line, Tampa Bay. And one thing Tom Brady hates is the interior pass rush and that gets near him, and they're going to get after him. That defensive line dominated them last year in that 9-0 game, and I think they're going to do it here. As long as Jameis Winston doesn't turn the ball over, and I think the fourth quarter will help him this week, I think the Saints win this game outright. They just have Tom Brady's number, and I think they're going to win the game outright. So give me the 2.5. I'll take New Orleans as the best bet.
I'm also taking them as a best bet. I had them at +3 on the early edge on Sunday mornings. I do the Sunday morning early edge show, and I give out some look-ahead picks, and one of them was Saints +3 because I said if that defense shows up against Atlanta and plays well, you're not going to get the 3 after the lines reopen. Defense didn't play well, and it was actually 3 briefly, but now with the injury issues for the Bucs, it's come down a little bit. Evans missed practice today. Godwin obviously isn't going to play. Julio missed practice. It just seems like I don't know who's Brady's going to throw to. So maybe it's a Leonard Fournette game and they can get the run game going the way that Atlanta did last week. But the Bucs have committed 36 turnovers over the last 2 years. That's about 1 per game. Saints have 11 of them in their 4 games. The Saints know how to turn Tom Brady over, and Brady hates playing them, like Brinson was saying. So with those interior OL issues, I think New Orleans wins this game too. So I have them as a best bet at +2.5 also.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Bucket. I've got them as a best bet too. So add that to the parlay. We got Packers -10, Saints +2.5. I'm just not sure that what we saw from the Buccaneers on Sunday night in Dallas is necessarily indicative of a team that is going to go on the road and dominate as a short road favorite. I mean, they took care of business against Dallas, but I think that's more of a Dallas issue than a Tampa issue. And so there are some holes with Tampa. And you mentioned the receivers. I mean, if all those guys are missing, that's going to make it tough on Tom Brady and probably leads to a lower scoring game. I think that you see the totals at 44. I think that favors the Saints. I think they'll find a way to turn Brady over and get the win as well. So
this, by the way, this is another one of those games where a team's playing consecutive road games against a team playing its home opener. So.
Yeah. And it's a great point. I mean, you have to think that and New Orleans should be loud for this one. You know, not that there are a ton of Saints fans in Atlanta too.
Yeah, they always are.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like if you just jumped into that game, sometimes you couldn't even tell definitely who was doing it. All right, let's take a break and we come back. More best bets from our blue ribbon panel of experts next. Jets at Browns. Browns -6.5. The Browns, fortunate to be 1-0 at this point, got bailed out by the referees against Carolina after allowing just an embarrassing comeback from Baker Mayfield in that lethargic Panthers offense. Total here 40.5. Pete, any thoughts on this one?
This is a tough game for me. I mean, when I look at it, I think that number's really bloated a little bit. But again, if you watch the Jets last week, they were kind of lifeless at times, and Flacco didn't look very good. I would lean to the Browns. Don't love it, but I would lean to the Browns. I do think being back home will help them a great deal in this one, and they're the better team. They have more talent, and Stefanski is a good coach. That showed out last week. So I'll take the Browns. Don't love it though.
Yeah, not tough one for me. I love the Jets as +6.5 as a best bet. The offense did nothing for the Jets last week. The defense did play pretty well against a very good Baltimore team that we think is pretty good. Defense allowed more than 23 yards on just 3 of their 12 drives, sunk by a few big plays in that game. The Cleveland offense just doesn't look capable of delivering big plays with Brissett at quarterback. That defense for Cleveland looked great for 3 quarters. Then, like Brinson said, let the Panthers back into it. So that worries me a little bit. But ultimately in this game, Jacoby Brissett is a 6.5-point favorite. And Jacoby Brissett should not be laying 6.5 points to any NFL team. I don't care how ugly they looked the previous week. So you just got to, I know the Jets are stinky. You just got to take them right now and look at the quarterback on the other side of the field and say, why is he almost a touchdown favorite?
Yeah, I'm sort of the same way. I think the Jets can win this game. You know, Robert Saleh made some weird comments this week about, about
receipts. He's looking for
keeping receipts. Everybody's questioning the Jets. It's like, dude, you could have 50 years of receipts. People laughed at the Jets for years. But the one thing I thought I saw from the Jets in at least in the first half until the explosive plays from the Ravens sort of opened up that game, they did a good job of bottling up the run. I think it was the lowest first half rushing total since Lamar Jackson was drafted for the Ravens. And so I think that bodes fairly well for this matchup against the Browns. Carolina had 25 plus missed tackles, and most of them with Nick Chubb. And granted, he's second highest yards per carry in NFL history. I think it's 500 minimum rushing attempts, ahead of Jim Brown, just behind Jamal Charles. He's capable of making people miss. But if Cleveland can't run it effectively, then that offense is really going to struggle. Like RJ said, 6.5 with Jacoby Brissett. That's just too many points. I think the Jets win outright. I think I had the Jets as the best bet in my column, but I've already got 6. I don't really think I need 7 best bets. So I'll let RJ.
That's desperation if you get 7.
It's not desperation. I had 7 last week. You had 6. Cardinals at the Raiders. Raiders -5.5, over under 51.5. Pete.
I wanted to take the Cardinals in this game. I really did, but they're bad right now. That's a bad football team.
Bad football.
They have injuries. They show up. The line isn't very good. Murray wasn't very good. Who's he throwing the ball to with the injuries? It's just not a good team right now, and I think that's going to show up here in this one. The Raiders were. I just watched their defense today. They did some good things on defense last week, and I think Crosby and Chandler Jones' revenge game is going to get after the quarterback there, and I think they're going to impact what Kyler Murray does. So I'll take the Raiders minus the points.
A best bet, or you just like the Raiders?
Just like the Raiders.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, my lean would be to the Cardinals. Look ahead was Vegas -3, but since that Arizona defense looked horrendous, the number shot up. That was against one of the NFL's best offenses. I think this is a little bit easier matchup here, even though we saw that Devontae Adams can go off in this offense. I knocked Arizona down 2 points in my power ratings. That's the most aggressive move I had for a team that wasn't related to injury.
Wow.
Obviously, the Cowboys dropped a lot further, but I had Arizona as a +1 team, 1 point better than average. Now I have them as a -1 team, 1 point worse than average. So maybe they should be further based on what you guys are saying. But I moved the Vegas up half a point or maybe even a full point. That only got the line to -4 for me. I think this is a bit of an overreaction. We know this is overreaction week in the NFL. So I think this big line move from the 3 to 5.5 is a little too much. I would lean to Arizona. I did make the over a best bet because not impressed with either of these defenses right now. Even at 51.5, I think these teams could, go back and forth and get into the mid to the high 50s in this game.
Yeah, we saw too. That over is a good look as well. I think I lean towards the Raiders, but I don't really love it. Like you said, the line move is concerning because if it was Raiders -3, I think I'm all over the Raiders. But Arizona scored 14 points, I think, in the fourth quarter last week, mostly garbage time points. So that's how I think they got 21 total points from the Chiefs and the Raiders, and the Chiefs and the Cardinals in a totally meaningless fourth quarter. So absolutely in play to get garbage time here. Josh McDaniels is this is not a Gruden situation where he slow things down if they get a lead or anything like that. I think McDaniels keep his foot on the gas in this spot. I would lean towards the Raiders, but don't have a best bet on this game. Falcons at the Rams. The Rams -10.5, over under 46.5. Another team that lost last week that is a double-digit favorite, Pete.
I love the Rams in this game. It's one of my best bets. I think this is a bad spot for Falcons. Long trip. Had a tough loss, and you're playing a team that's rested with a bunch of veteran players and a coach who can fix the mess that they were in opening week. I just think that this is a great spot for the Rams. Big number, I get it. And normally I hate laying a big number, but I'm going to lay it in this game. I'm going to take the Rams minus the points. Best bet.
The Rams offense looked terrible in the opener. I was hoping to get better value here and play him in single digits. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. I'm also leaning to the Rams. I think -10 is fine. Teams that play on Thursday in week 1 are 16-4 against the spread in week 2 since 2011 per Warren Sharp. Not only do these teams win, they cover. So Rams D struggled to stop Buffalo's pass offense. Most defenses are going to struggle to stop Buffalo's offense. This is going to be a much easier task against this offense here. So I think the Rams can win pretty handily, unless there's some hidden Matthew Stafford elbow thing going on where Sean McVay just refuses to open up the offense. And I guess we'll know about that, the more they play. But right now, I think Rams is the play.
Yeah, I would lean Rams too. This is like Pete notes, tough. It's just a tough spot for the Falcons. I mean, you have to, and like they had, you had New Orleans dead to rights and you let them just storm back. I mean, if New Orleans is able to move the ball that effectively, that quickly, it's not going to be hard for the Rams to move the ball at all. And I think this is a big time Allen Robinson squeaky wheel spot. I can't put it as a best bet, but I would take the over on Allen Robinson catches and receiving yards, because when you sign a guy like that in the offseason, and then week 1 doesn't do much and Cooper Kupp, and the team loses, there'll be an emphasis on getting plays where Robinson gets open. And look, with Cooper Kupp there, it's not going to be easy for the Falcons to slow this team down. I would lean towards the Rams as well. Panthers at the Giants. The Giants, a stunner week 1 victory, although I did predict it. And we all had them as a best bet. They're favored by 2 with an over under a 43.5 here, Pete.
Yeah, this is a tough game for me. I want to take the Giants. I'm taking the Giants, but not as a best bet. I just think Carolina did nothing for 3 quarters last week, and neither did the Giants for a half. So it's hard to really put a gauge on this. But I'm leaning to the Giants because I think Saquon Barkley will run the ball, and they'll make enough plays in the game. It's going to be ugly. I'd probably lean to the under as well, but I'll take the Giants minus the points. Don't love it.
So the Giants, I think, played about as well as they could have. Daniel Jones was 17-21, Saquon 164 yards rushing. They actually put together a quality defensive game plan, slowed down Derrick Henry, still had 80-something yards, but, didn't really break the game open as you expect him to do in this matchup. You put all that together and they won by 1 at the very end and just eked out a win. So I would like to see them have a more dominant win if you're going to do that, especially against a team I'm not high on in the Titans. That offense for Carolina was brutal until the fourth quarter. Run game had issues in particular. I do like fading a team coming off a surprise surprise upset win in week 1 that's favored in week 2. So my lean would be to Carolina, but I'm throwing them in a teaser here, get them up to +8. I think getting 8 points against a team like the Giants that we don't expect to be beating down the doors and blowing teams out is a pretty safe play. So love teasing this one up, and I'm going to have a teaser leg to pair with them in a similar situation here in a second.
The old Ron Rivera teaser special coming, maybe. I guess that's a spoiler, but I was trying to make a Carolina reference. Anywho, I like the Panthers in the spot. Not a best bet. Carolina could not have looked worse coming out of the gates. Baker very rusty. They definitely got things going when they opened it up out of desperation a little bit. And I think that this is an extremely desperate team, because if you start 0-2 against the Browns and at the Giants, and the Browns with no Deshaun Watson, Matt Rule's already flambéed seat is going to get even hotter. And, it's just one of those spots where, I don't, maybe the Giants fans will probably be amped up. I know the Giants are thrilled about, the start they had. I actually did the Giants podcast last night, Wednesday night, and it's the Giants Daily podcast or Giants Weekly podcast, and we were previewing the game, and both guys agree that this is just a bad matchup for the Giants because their linebacking core with Christian McCaffrey, and I think we'll see McCaffrey make a lot more plays this week. I think Carolina wins, probably a low-scoring game. Would not want to touch the total, but I mean, I'll probably toss Carolina in a money line parlay around, one of those around the place. Commandos. Ye old WFTs at the Lions. The Detroit Lions favored in the game, -1.5 with an over under of 48.5, Pete.
Yeah, this game is tough for me too, but I like the Commanders. The Lions defense was bad last week, and I know that's the Eagles and they do things differently. They're hard to get ready for, but I like Washington's offense. And believe it or not, Carson Wentz did some good things last week. And they have some weapons on that team. It's too bad they don't have Robinson, because I know they would have used him a ton. But I like Washington to go in there and win this game. I think it'll be a high-scoring game, but I'm going to take Washington plus the points.
Yeah, Washington looked mostly good last week, and you can qualify it by saying he played a bad Jacksonville defense. Well, he gets another bad defense here. Washington also allowed 6.2 yards per play in week 1. In that game, Detroit gave up 6.3 yards per play. I think you can score a ton of points in this game. The total was 49. It's ticked down to 48.5 with DeAndre Swift banged up with some injuries on the offensive line for Detroit. So maybe people aren't expecting as many points. I don't care. I'm going to make it a best bet. Go over the 48.5 because we got it under that key number of 49. I think Detroit's going to be a popular over team all year with their improved offense and their bad defense. And you talk about the overreaction week earlier, like I said, that's when you have these 1-0 teams playing 0-1 teams. You typically want to back the 0-1 team because the market is reacting differently to each team, putting too much stock into what they saw in week 1. The market is treating Detroit like they're the 1-0 team. This was pick'em on the look ahead, and then it jumped up to 2.5, and it just seemed everybody wanted to back Detroit in this game. Now, because of those injury issues, it's come down a little bit to 1.5. I think Detroit is still getting all the respect in this game, and Washington's not, even though Washington won and Detroit didn't. So in terms of overreaction week, I'm treating this like Detroit won and Washington didn't, and backing Washington as well. It's part of my teaser. Tease it up to +7.5. Again, Detroit, just if they don't win a game by more than a touchdown, I'm good there. So I love putting those two teams together in a teaser, but I would back the Commanders too at 1.5.
Yeah, I think that's a good call on that teaser, because we've seen.
I like that teaser.
Yeah, Detroit ain't scared to get involved in a last second crazy, come through the backdoor situation. Where, you're getting that cushion where it would be shocking if Washington wasn't able to move the ball through the air with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, who looked freaking great in week 1. I had the over. This is actually when I was doing some early DFS work this week. The number one game that I circled to sort of stack was this game, because I think it's points galore. I watched a lot of that Washington-Jacksonville game. The 6.2 yards per play, and again, Jacksonville moved the ball pretty easily against Washington. They just couldn't close and score. And I think Detroit's gonna be able to move it extremely easy. We saw last week with the Eagles, they gave up 35 points, and then they were able to rapid fire reel off some scores, and they ended up covering, unfortunately, from one of my best bets. But it speaks to what Detroit is going to do and how aggressively they will continue to try to score even when they're kind of out of a game. So I got the over here, 48.5, as a best bet as well. Another over that I've got a best bet on, the Vikings at the Eagles, Monday Night Football, the doubleheader. 50.5. I think the same sort of deal with that we saw, like talking about with Washington and Detroit. I like the over in this spot. It's the Eagles can score. They got going really slowly against the Lions, but once they started moving, they pile up the points. And then, of course, you saw with the Vikings, they are capable of scoring quickly as well. Justin Jefferson looks like the best receiver in football. And if you get this, Pete, if you get this Vikings team in a shootout, I think we can get some real back and forth on Monday night.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. And here's the thing about, the Vikings are facing what the Lions faced and what the Saints faced when you play those unconventional offenses, particularly when you've already had the game played and now you got to get ready for them. I know they've done work on them before the season to get ready for them. It's tough to do. So I think the Eagles are going to score. I think the Vikings will score. The Eagles defense was not good last week. They tackled terribly, by the way. They were terrible tacklers that day. I'm going to take the Eagles, though, in this game, but I do agree with you. I think it's going to go over the total.
Pete, you think the Vikings are going to score a bunch of points in this game? Who's the quarterback of the Vikings?
Yeah, what am I talking about? It's nighttime.
New coach.
I can throw quick screens to Jefferson and get to 14. I mean, I can.
Yeah.
Myself.
Can Kirk Cousins though? That's the question. It's
I think they'll score. I think the Eagles defense was bad last week. RJ, that was a bad defense.
Yeah, especially in the second half. They'll need to fix the run defense issues, particularly for this game. I think they can, though. The talent is there up front. Minnesota riding high after embarrassing Green Bay. That's pushed this line down a little bit. The look ahead was 3, I believe. I have Philly's home field advantage is 1.5 points. So now at 2, they're saying Philly's a little bit better than Minnesota. I think that's true. I still believe in this Philly team, top to bottom. It's a very good roster. So I would lean to Philly. I think 3 was probably closer to the right number than 2. But, with how the Vikings look last week, even though Kirk Cousins is playing in prime time, I'm not in a rush to play it. I definitely don't want to tease the Vikings just in case we get that Kirk Cousins stud.
Yeah, that's the Kirk Cousins dud is always a concern when you talk about a primetime game with the Vikings. The Dolphins at the Ravens. Ravens minus 3.5, over under 44.5. I think Miami had a fumble, a strip sacks fumble in the end zone, and also had that 42-yard touchdown pass to Jalen Waddle with 4th and 7 with like sub 30 seconds left. And you're not going to get those every week. Like those are kind of fluky scores. The Dolphins offense could have been a lot less effective than it was last week. I got the Ravens as a best bet here. Ravens minus 3.5. I think they just keep it rolling. They took, sort of a little rusty in that first half, but then started to really show some explosive plays. Devin Duvernay. I always mispronounce Duvernay. What if he's like a legit number 2 guy, and then we've got freaking Rashad Bateman maybe emerging. He had a nice long touchdown catch. This could be a really dangerous offense if those guys start to really click. I like the Ravens as a best bet here.
I don't love this game at all, but I would lean to the Ravens. You're right. The Dolphins, they were raving about 2, and they did nothing on it. They scored 1 touchdown, and it was on that 4th down play where there's no risk. You threw it in the middle of the field, big deal. So much so that Brady Quinn compared Tua to Dan Fouts yesterday when we were doing our pick show. You can believe that.
Yeah, I saw. I can't remember who he works for now, but Michael Shoddy was dragging him.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Dan Fouts? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
amazing. So I'll lean to the Ravens. I don't love them, but I'll take the Ravens minus the points.
I lean the Ravens too. I'm very high on both these teams. Baltimore's number 3 in my power ratings. Miami's tied for 6th. Injuries continue to kill Baltimore. Lost 2 players out for the year last week, but the Dolphins also have injury issues on their offensive line with Armstead, and I believe one other player, banged up, not practicing. I think that the Baltimore can manage at offensive tackle until Stanley's healthy, and I hope Peters is back at cornerback for this game. We'll see. So I think the line should probably be 4, so only a slight lean to Baltimore.
All right. We'll work through a couple here quickly. 3 more games to go. Seahawks at the 49ers. 49ers minus 9, over under 41.5. Pete, this line actually moved towards the 49ers after the Seahawks upset the Broncos on Monday night.
Yeah, this is too many. I would lean to the Seahawks. It's way too many. After I watched it, it's hard to gauge what you saw from the 49ers last week because of that weather. But Lance made a couple good throws. He made a couple really bad ones too. So it's hard to evaluate them. I'd take the 9 just because I think it's too many.
Seattle coming off emotional win over Russ. They're due for a letdown here. You can get 8.5 at some places. That makes it right for being a teaser like here. If you want to tease this and the Bengals, they're both 4:00 games. I think that's pretty winning proposition, but I didn't do it here since we're taking 9 in our picks. I would lean to the Niners here. Can't evaluate anything about that game in that monsoon. So on new turf, they were worried about the turf coming into the game, and then the football gods dump a deluge onto the field and say go ahead and play in that. So it's always funny how that works out, but it's possible Trey Lance is bad and this line looks awful in 4 weeks, but I still haven't, changed my opinion on San Francisco. from coming into the season, and I thought they were a Super Bowl team. So I think 9 is fine. I think 8.5 is fine. But if you can get 8.5, definitely look to tease it down.
I went back. I didn't realize like the Seahawks have kind of dominated the 49ers the last few years. And that kind of makes me want to take the 9, but it's such a scary proposition because this 49ers team can I mean, like the Broncos fumbled twice at the 1 yard line. Like Seattle needed a lot of things to go their way to win that game. You feel like if Lance is as good as we think he could be with decent weather, he's going to be able to move the ball around easily. They'll have some explosive plays, and you would hope that defense won't just, like you have to think that the weather had something to do with how badly the defense, they gave up those explosive plays to the Bears in week 2. I would lean the Seahawks, but I wouldn't want to touch this one personally. I like that teaser idea with the Bengals, who are -7.5 at the Cowboys over under 41.5. Of course, if you bet this line a week ago, you've got some great CLV because the Bengals are probably a pick 'em or plus a couple of points. Dak Prescott now out for a lengthy period of time. Don't listen to Jerry Jones for the 4 weeks, in my opinion. What do you think about this one, Pete?
Look, when you look at the Cowboys last week, they were bad when Dak Prescott was in the game. I mean, they didn't get guys open. They
scored 3 more points with Dak in 3+ quarters. I mean,
but I'm going to take the Cowboys to hang around. I think that the hook 7.5. It is still right. It's still 7.5. I'm going to take the hook. I think that's too many. Cooper Rush isn't terrible. They're not going to be much worse on that side of the ball. And the Bengals offensive line had major issues last week. Parsons might get after him. So I'm going to take the Cowboys plus the points.
Yeah, Cooper Rush came in last year, played pretty decently, and got a win for the Cowboys that nobody was expecting. So, he's not a name backup quarterback, but he can at least hold his own. The problem is, like you said, that offense was terrible even with Dak. So I don't know how you fix that in 1 week. But I'm typically looking to backup quarterbacks when they take over because the line move is too extreme. I think that's probably in place here. I would lean Dallas because Joe Burrow looked nowhere near 100% in that game, turning the ball over left and right. And we know the issues he dealt with in August. So I don't know that he's 100% in this game. And it seems like too many points for him to lay. I wouldn't mind teasing the Bengals, but 7.5, it feels like Cowboys are the value.
Yeah, for me, it's Cincy or nothing here. I'm glad that this is not a primetime game, and I'd force some kind of bet on it. But I think maybe Cowboys team total under, something like that. Cincinnati, turned the ball over 5 times and still almost beat Pittsburgh. Dallas's offense is going to struggle mightily. There was a blueprint there from Tampa Bay how to shut down CeeDee Lamb, and I think the Bengals will probably use it. But laying 7.5 on the road is a bit much. There's somebody that has a question for you in the chat, Pete. Someone named Ryan Wilson wants to know, hey, Prisco, is Tua more like Dan Fouts or Mason Rudolph?
Mason Rudolph.
That's Ryan Wilson that we work with.
I know who it is.
Okay. I don't know why he's shouting there. God, right?
He really is shouting. He's closer to Mason Rudolph than he is to Dan Fouts, but he's better than Mason Rudolph.
What is happening here?
That's for when the Steelers beat the Bengals. We pulled a bunch of sound clips from the game to throw up there. Finally, Monday Night Football, the first of a doubleheader, but they're overlapping doubleheaders, so kind of not really a doubleheader. Sort of annoying, to be honest. Titans at the Bills. Bills -10 over under 48. The Bills, of course, look like an absolute unit on a 8-day. Like there's 11 days between these games. I mean, oh my God, how does Tennessee keep this close? Oh God.
You know what this is? This is the schedule makers helping the Bills for what they did to them 2 years ago during
the Titans screwed them over.
Yeah, remember?
Yeah.
And so that now they got 11 days off, and they're going to blast the Titans. Right. And I know the last 2 years the Titans have won. That isn't happening here. This Bills team is different because they're 8 deep on the defensive line, and they will get after the quarterback and they will stop the run. And Josh Allen will do his thing as well. I'm taking Buffalo blowout.
Yeah, the look-ahead line of 7.5 never made sense unless you thought Tennessee was a very good team, and I think nobody really thought that. So on that same early edge show on Sunday morning, I said get the Bills in a teaser right now because 7.5 is going to be long gone. By the time we get to the end of the day, tease them with the Steelers. Then we have the TJ Watt injury, so it didn't work out great on that leg. But I'll still take it 10 times out of 10 to get the Bills down to 1.5 in this game. I would lean to Buffalo 10 as well. The line's more fair. I don't know how Tennessee offense handles that Buffalo defense like you're talking about. And then if Tennessee gets behind, you can't feature Henry in the second half and try to get through the back door because you got to throw a lot and try to catch up. So that's not how Tennessee's built. So it's going to be hard to backdoor this one. I like the Bills too.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you take the Titans is if you just think like there's some sort of magic beans that Mike Vrabel has when it comes to playing Sean McDermott and the Bills. Because I mean, the matchup wise, this is not a great matchup for the Bills. Somebody Kentucky Pete says the Bills are overrated. I think the Bills are properly rated, and the Bills are just awesome. There's no reason they shouldn't just smash the Titans. Primetime games can get a little weird, but I guess it is Buffalo's home opener. I mean, I think I took the Titans in our picks against the spread, but I do not feel good about it. I don't blame you for backing the Bills.
What's the other third team for our parlay?
Oh yeah, we need
how about you guys like the over in the Lions game? That was one two of your best bets,
Yep.
right? I like that too. Let's
okay.
throw that.
All right, all right, good call. That's the third leg of our teaser. So Lions over 48.5.
I think
Packers
the other
minus
team
10.
would have been the Ravens. I think everybody kind of liked the Ravens.
Oh,
right?
Ravens. We could do Ravens too instead.
Whatever you guys want. Doesn't matter to me.
What do you want to do?
You
RJ?
call.
I'm terrible at over unders.
I want to bet. I want to hypothetically aggressively bet on the over in the Washington game. So I don't want to ruin it with the parlay. So let's go Ravens.
All right.
Hypothetically.
Actually,
Okay.
because now we locked that in, let's do the other one because we're really bad at changing things at the last second. So
Oh, you're right.
let's
Yeah,
put
all right. So we'll do the over.
Yeah, so do the over.
All right. So you got the over 48.5 in the Washington Detroit game. Packers minus 10, Saints plus 2.5. That is the can't lose parlay. All right, here are our best bets. Recap. RJ's best bets. Green Bay minus 10, Jets plus 6.5, Colts minus 4, Washington over 48.5, Arizona over 51.5, a teaser with Carolina plus 8.5 and Washington plus 7.5, and the Saints plus 2.5. Pete's best bets. Saints plus 2.5, Jaguars plus 4, Pats minus 2, Rams minus 10.5, and Texans plus 10. And Brinson best bets. Packers minus 10, Saints plus 2.5, Ravens minus 3.5, Eagles over 50.5, Lions over 48.5, and Pats under 40. That will do it for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Leave your best bets in the comments. Smash that like button. Of course, subscribe and turn on alerts so you know when we go live. For Pete, for RJ, I'm Brinson. We will see you guys later.